Welcome to Quench. It is so great to have all of you here. We are now at our live home, away from home, which is Copia, the CIA at Copia in the beautiful Napa Valley. It is a wonderful way for us to be able to have a live studio audience. So everybody wave because the home crowd wants to know how happy you are to be here. So again, thank you. Tonight's topic for Quench really is inspired by two important milestones for us this year. One is America 250, and the other one is the 50th anniversary of the 1976 Judgment of Paris tasting. And that theme for tonight is called the Mount Crushmore of American wine. And if you're wondering what ChatGPT can do with 4 snapshots of 4 heroes of wine, you have just discovered it. But I was sitting there one night and thinking, these are people that as part of this tasting that really changed the world of wine, not just Napa Valley or California. And then it's America 250, and they kind of birthed a whole new take on a many millennia old industry that is wine. So that is our topic tonight. You saw the names there, Patricia Gallagher, you're going to learn more about that one. Steven Spurrier maybe needs no introduction, but you'll learn a little bit more about him as well. And then, of course, Andrea Tchelistcheff and Robert Mondavi. None of their wines were in the Paris tasting. We're going to talk about why that is the case. But their hearts and souls and spirits most certainly were. I am your host, Andrea Emma Robinson, and here to help me bring the stories of these great visionaries from the past into the present and the future is vintner and grapevine whisperer extraordinaire, Steve Matthiasson. Give me a high five. So, whether you are joining me from home or in person, first of all, this is something very special that you and I and a few of the other people, because we have quite a few industry people here, we all get to toast to the fact that we're at work.
Yes.
This is good. We're going to taste out of order because those of you who have been here before, and a few of you have, I really appreciate you coming back. You know I go off script all the time. I have a 5-page script here. What good will it do me? We'll see. But Steve, I started talking to you about this Mount Crushmore concept at your state vineyard over a year ago. I looked back in my phone and it was March of 2025. I've been working on this documentary series called The Swirled Cup, which some of you know about. You'll see a little bit more about it tonight, for almost 5 years, actually a little bit more than that. But I came to talk to you about the Mount Crushmore of American wine, and when I told you who I thought should be on it, you echoed pretty much what anybody else I've ever asked about it said, which was absolutely, those are the people who should be. We're going to get into that in a great deal of detail because what I would say about Steve, and you can tell me if you agree, you're really kind of a mentee of a mentee in the sense that Andrea Tchelistcheff and Robert Mondavi both mentored Warren Winiarski, and then you were mentored by him, and then it kind of went back the other way. We're going to taste your wine, and it's actually wine number 2. So we're going to taste that first, but just start out by telling us a little bit about your relationship with Warren and what it meant to you.
Warren was a lifelong teacher and a lifelong student, right? And
Great point.
Anyone who's into wine, you have to carry both of those on your path because you'll never know all of it.
Right.
But also, you want to share what you do, what you have figured out, what you've been taught, and keep it going. I mean, this is so ancient, right? And
Yes.
there's no good books there's a lot of good books on wine appreciation. There's a lot of good books on slivers of winemaking, but there's no book that tells you the whole deal. It's too vast and ancient and convoluted, and it's an oral history.
It's like a book on parenting. It's just never going to work out because
exactly.
Every year, every kid, every vintage, I mean, it's always going to be different, and then you're going to get a rhythm, and then it's going to change. Well, let's jump into your wine first because there's just so much to unpack about these people and the role that they had. But I first want to let's throw the graphic on the screen so we can see what we're tasting here. This is your Vista Vineyard Chardonnay. And I took this from the tech sheet, neutral barrel fermented with native yeast, no new oak, and you allowed for this vintage, I think, a third to go through mallow. I think that where this vineyard is kind of a Goldilocks for Napa Valley Chardonnay because right in that little section, which is just adjacent to the Oak Knoll district, you have the coolness of South Napa Valley, but then you have that place where you've got the mountain protection or the hill protection at that point, so it's not super cold, Then it's like the fog we came there early. The fog drops away earlier than Carnero, so then you get this beautiful morning sun, and it's this perfect zone, in my opinion. But talk a little bit about this wine.
So the soils here are marine origin, kind of from the side of the base of Mount Veeder, which is old marine shale. And I really think that helps with the acidity also in this little Goldilocks spot. Marine alluvium of marine origin. And so what you get texture, and you get the spine of acidity, but you get this lemony kind of character that the fog manages to hold. Like that richness, a pole of richness and freshness both dancing together. And with Chardonnay, it's always a tension between richness and freshness is what makes Chardonnay exciting.
Exciting and also age-worthy, and I'm just curious, how long have you been making Chardonnay? Have you kept a library, or at least a few bottles? And what's the oldest, like how much age of Chardonnay have you had on one of your Chardonnay
So
wines?
the first vintage of this particular wine was 2011.
Wow.
And
Cool.
and it's still going strong.
Cool.
It's good. And the thing about libraries is that you hope you're getting better every year at what you do. That if the 2011 is still going strong, the 2023 is really going to go strong. Yeah.
Great point. I point that out because right now we have a great pairing plate in front of us, and maybe we'll just take a quick look at that for the people at home to have that moment of wistful yearning and longing. You have from Chef Chris Lemarand here at the Grove Restaurant, but you've got popcorn, we've got truffled salt there if you want to add a little bit of the truffle salt to that. You've also got polpette, which is a mixture of pork and beef meatball. It's a grandmother's recipe from one of the prior sous chefs here. You have a fennel and rosemary biscotti. And then we have a euphoria cheese. So that's an aged Gouda style cheese that is in the other savory biscotti. Then it's a spring pea veloute with sesame oil. So I want you to taste that with the Linda Vista Chardonnay. Just take a little swig of it. I wouldn't chase the entire thing like a shooter. Leave a little bit for the other Chardonnay as well. But for me, with a more delicate taste profile that you get on this style of Chardonnay, but then that little kick of sesame oil brings in a nice kind of creamy, nutty counterpoint to that style. I think that's a perfect thing. And then the other thing that you have on the plate is aged Spanish Manchego cheese, which to me is magic fairy dust for any wine, but is especially great with Cabernet Sauvignons. We have 3 of them. And as we are proceeding through the evening, I would encourage you, we're not going to be tasting them just yet, but I want you to start nosing them, because we have 3 different Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignons. We have the Corison Sunbasket, St. Helena Estate Vineyard. It's 100% cab. We'll get more into that. Then we have I forgot the order. Somebody can help me. I think it's Robert Mondavi is next, right? Yes, the To Kalon Reserve. And then we have the Stag's Leap SLV. So maybe it's time for another toast. It's good to be us. This does not suck, right? Okay. Here, it's good to be us. Awesome. That's all right. So what did we think of that pairing, by the way? Right? Okay, I heard a couple of great responses. And that's the other thing that throughout, we always have here at the CIA at Copia. The first time I said this to the chef, and he comes from Michelin star restaurant background, so I'm like, is it okay if we have popcorn? He's like, yes. So my kind of guy. Popcorn is the other magic fairy dust for wine, but especially Chardonnay. So you make sure to pair that. Just tell us, before we move on from this wine, what does neutral oak do? Since we're talking neutral, so it's not adding aroma or flavor, what are we looking for when the oak is neutral? And this is a really big common thing now. People are backing off of oak for flavor a lot.
Back to Warren Winiarski, the principle is transparency, restraint in the winemaking so you have transparency to the place, right? And so new oak barrels have lots of flavor from the oak, and that would, in our case, we think that's going to obscure the place. So neutral oak still gives you the porosity that an oak barrel has, the little bit of air, the leaves contact, all the yeast that settle to the bottom that give you some richness with the finish, but they're not bringing any flavor, and so they maintain the transparency of the wine.
I just had this experience of the reverb of the sesame oil and the acid in the wine. I don't know, there's something really crazy cool going on there. That's really good.
Yes.
And the other thing I'm getting right now, I don't know if you tried, did you try it? The finish. The finish of both the wine and the dish are just cruising along together. Who's with me on this? This is amazing.
It's brought out the finish of the wine.
And now there's almost like a salinity. You were talking about kind of that marine-based soil thing. Okay, we have to go on. I want to talk a little bit about Robert Mondavi. I want to bring him into this for a moment because we're going to try wine now, number one. We're going backwards. The Trois Noix Chardonnay. And this is a vineyard, I think you're familiar with it because it's not that far from Linda Vista. Kind
Right
of
in that same little Chardonnay grotto.
same little. We've just named it the Chardonnay Grotto, right? They've got the 8th Street winemaking ghetto over in Sonoma. We've got the Chardonnay Grotto over here, and I think that's better. But it's actually a really special place. This is the Muir-Hanna vineyard. And let's get our roving cam because I want people to understand the role that the Hanna family had in the 1976 Paris tasting. We have Michael Hanna, but before we jump onto him, let's go ahead and play our Mondavi video.
I believe that what Robert Mondavi had done for the wine industry, which is a rising tide lifts all grapes, he wasn't just promoting Mondavi wines, he was truly fertilizing the entire industry.
One of the things that I think helped us go so far, so fast, was both the growers and the wineries met with each other and tried to do things to make everybody better. And I think a lot of the credit for this goes to Robert Mondavi and sharing information on how to do the best job we can, both to get the best quality and also to protect the environment and protect the soil and improve the soil.
I filmed with them the same day as I did with you, and it was a really nifty time because I got to go for the first time with Michael Hanna to the place where some very famous Chardonnay grapes were grown. Michael, if you can just tell us, what does the Hanna family have in connection to the 1976 Paris tasting?
My grandfather planted Chardonnay grapes in 68 or 69, convinced by Mike Gergich, who was the winemaker at Chateau Montelena at the time. And my pop's first harvest was the Barrett's first crush at Chateau Montelena, and that was 72. And his grapes were in that bottle of 73 Chardonnay that won the Paris tasting in 76.
So I think they were maybe the only Napa fruit in that wine. There was some Alexander Valley and some Russian River Valley maybe. And it's funny because I've known Michael and Leonora probably for the first 15 years. I knew them as just the other parents that drove on every field trip because our kids have gone to school together. And so that's just, and then I remember sitting with your dad, with Bill and Claudia at a basketball game and saying I was working on this documentary about everything that came out of the Paris tasting because it was so much of a huge impact. And I was like, do you guys know about that? And they're like, oh yeah, we know all about it. But of course they didn't say a word. I feel like a dummy when I figured it out. I do want to come back to this wine because one of the things that came out in that interview was this notion, and you talked about it in our interview, of especially Robert Mondavi, the idea that we're only as good as our weakest link, although everybody else would say it in a more positive way, the rising tide lifts all ships. And then Bill talked about how getting growers and winemakers together and moving things to the next level. And so if we can just have our roving camera, I just want to talk to Jamie Araujo really quickly because we're tasting in wine number one, the Trois Noix Muir-Hanna Vineyards Chardonnay. And you saw in that video that I was actually there on a day where I got a chance to taste a trial, grower to wine to vintner, of two different approaches to farming, and it was a drastic difference in taste profile. They were both really good, but it was super cool to see this innovation that was happening. So Jamie, can you talk a little bit about this wine?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is the finished wine, our Muir-Hanna Chardonnay. We do work with two different blocks. So we have some beautiful old vine Chardonnay, about 40 years old, coming from one block, and then about 18 years old coming from the other. Again, zero mallow, neutral oak, and native ferment. When I tell people about this wine, I always say it's my baby who sleeps through the night. This wine it tastes good as grapes, it tastes good as juice, it tastes good as fermentation, it tastes good as wine. But I was super excited a few years ago, talking with Michael, to see if we could get a trial of some regenerative farming practices going in our Chardonnay and Cabernet blocks. And we discussed it for a long time. We made sure that everybody was happy with what we were doing. And we did a little trial. So what we did on our end, obviously Michael farmed those two things differently, 2 little bits of the vineyard of the block. And then we harvested, fermented them completely separately. So we were able to see if there was a difference, whether that was in taste, in yield, whatever. And it's been super interesting. We have expanded the trial, I'm very happy to say. Michael has actually entered us in the One Block Challenge, which is a global regenerative.
Yay, Michael! Yay, Jamie!
Global regenerative farming initiative, I guess is probably the best way to put it. And it's been super interesting. It's not without its challenges, I think, but one of the wonderful things has also been bringing us closer as winemaker and grape grower, and keeping that communication and developing it in a richer way, which has been, for me anyway, has been a really wonderful, fun thing to do.
Fabulous. So, Steve, before we go on to Reds and to get back to our sort of Mount Crushmore people, you had talked about, and there's a quote, if those of you who might be coming to there's a short film screening of the documentary on Saturday, you'll see some quotes from Steve in it. One, he talked about Robert Mondavi as being an information sharer and a resource sharer, very much like Bill discussed. And I think today, he would probably be at the forefront of efforts like regenerative. Is there a simple way to explain to people what is meant by regenerative? Because it's really important. It's on a lot of tips of a lot of tongues.
So regenerative organic, those 2 words go together. Organic farming, no synthetic pesticides or fertilizers, right? Only natural pesticides or fertilizers. Regenerative, on top of that, we're conserving soil. We're sequestering carbon from the air into the soil. We're creating habitat for migratory songbirds or migratory insects like monarch butterflies. We're saving water, and there's a social equity component. So if the vineyard workers are part of that, and so there's living wage and upward mobility benefits of participating in the community, lifting people up. So all those are this sort of holistic concept of regenerative agriculture.
Really, I think something that more and more of us are looking at. It's interesting because I was just reading an article that there are regenerative certifications that do allow synthetics, but regenerative organic is not supposed to. And it's not that everything synthetic is bad, but there are some that are pretty serious. And let's say from a terroir perspective, from a wine quality perspective, if you want great wine that's transparent to terroir, like you were talking about, you do want the soil to just be its own organism in the same way that you want your gut microbiome to be healthy and balanced and not be having all kinds of crazy influences. Is that fair to say? Do we make some sense, right?
And it makes better wine.
And that's the thing. At the end of the day, it's this virtuous cycle that, it's if the wine's better. And Jamie made a great point that sometimes there is an adaptation of time, and Michael and I have talked about this, where you're trying to get the vine back to balance in a new system where it's maybe not being fed synthetics or whatever, and it takes some time for it to get to its yield set point, kind of like we all have a weight set point and an energy and a sleep set point. Vines do too. Is that right?
Yes, and also you're never there. It's a process, it's a goal, it's a movement forward. And so everyone can just be taking the steps and moving forward, and that's the beautiful thing about agriculture. It's so complex, and as long as everyone's moving forward, then we're improving it, we're regenerating. That's the idea.
Yeah, that's like the Japanese total quality management, just continuous improvement is one of your biggest goals. And you have a few areas where you're trying to improve. Wine quality is one, and at the end of the day, we can't really charge more for terroir if we're not transmitting it in the bottle and in the glass, right? So how are these red wines tasting and smelling? We're giving them some time to air. Wow, they're just incredibly different and incredibly beautiful. This is what's great about an opportunity like this, and I hope that you all appreciate it. It used to be the case that people looked at California Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon as like a monolith, But you smell these three wines, and they are singing different songs, and probably from different musical genres. We've got symphonies, we've got maybe a bad boy hip hop in here, I'm not really sure, but there's a lot of cool stuff going down, and I think that's the sign of a great terroir. I want to get to Patricia Gallagher before we get too far, and you can start tasting your reds. Not many people know of the role that she played in the Judgment of Paris tasting, but it was critical, as in it was her idea. And before Steven passed away in 2021, he told me, as I told him I was embarking on this project, that he really wanted people to know that. So let's take a look at a little video about Patricia.
By 1976, America's bicentennial birthday, the Académie du Vin, tucked just off the Place de la Madeleine, had become one of Paris's premier wine schools. And at its helm was an unlikely figure, Patricia Gallagher, an American woman fluent in the language of French wine and electrified by news from home that California wines were rising fast. But could they dare to rival the best of France? Well, not based on what you could get in Paris at the time.
We had celebrated 4th of July here in Paris, but with just the wines we could find, and they were dreadful. I felt that as an American, we had to do better for the bicentennial.
But with a wine quality revolution afoot, there needed to be a proper tasting of the new wave of California wines. So she turned to the owner of the Academy and its companion wine shop, Steven Spurrier, an already beloved figure in the world of wine who would go on to become one of its legends.
I'd never tasted California wine before, and my managing partner was a lady called Patricia Gallagher, who was American, whose family had arrived in America in the late 1600s, and she was so proud of her country and furious that Paris had no California wine. And so she said, we must do something about this. I said, Patricia, it's very simple. Spend a week or so in California and come back and tell me whether we should really do something.
So it's not a coincidence that the 50th anniversary of the Paris tasting coincides with America 250, because it was the bicentennial that inspired it. And as you may not know, and if you're reading, you can read the sign on your way out, they went through so many hoops to actually get really good wine from California over there, because Patricia had told me that what you could get at Fauchon and Ediard was basically jug stuff. And so they had to go to a lot of trouble, and one of the heroes who actually helped get the wine there was André Tchelistcheff. If you had to sum up what André's contribution was to California wine, and it goes far beyond that, as I learned, Washington, Oregon, Antinori talks about him helping them in Tuscany. They're all wearing like jacket and tie in the vineyard in the 70s when he went over there. What would you say would be his major contributions?
I mean, he taught a whole generation of winemakers here in Napa how to make fine wine, and that it started in the vineyard. He was a vineyard guy, and there's a whole generation of people. He loved teaching and mentoring, just like Warren, just like every great winemaker. And he didn't hold his information. He shared it and really took this sort of jug wine region and said, no, we believed in it, and taught people.
And it's interesting that you mentioned that, because and it's you can picture the family tree right now, right? Because you have Robert Mondavi, you have André Tchelistcheff, Mike Gergich, who purchased the Hanna grapes to make the Montelena Chardonnay, worked for André for 8 years at BV. He worked for Robert and made their 1969 Cabernet that made them famous. He's mentored so many people. Mm-hmm. Warren was at Robert Mondavi, is that not correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he was also mentored by André, right?
Yeah, he was at Mondavi in 1966, I believe.
So day one,
yeah,
essentially, which is it's really quite special when you think about it. I want to show a video that talks about, you mentioned that André was a vineyard guy. And I think he would be so happy to be here today, because we're all talking about the vineyard so much more than the cellar now. And in fact, it seems like people are backing off so much in the cellar. But let's play the Paul Hobbs Corison video.
I love this concept of Rushmore, Crushmore. André Tchelistcheff was one of the greats. He had the old European approach of combining viticulture and enology into one universe, one school of thought.
We're farmers first, and everything in that glass of wine came from either the earth or the sky. The grapevine is the interpreter, and wine is one of the few things in the world that can speak of both time and place, and then go forward into time, still speaking of time and place.
So we've got wine number 3 is the Corison Sunbasket Estate Vineyard Chardonnay, and I've got Kathy Corison and Grace Corison Martin right here. Just Kathy, can you just talk about this vineyard, and we'll have you talk about the wine as well, but talk about the vineyard and Andre.
It's always been one of my favorite vineyards. I've sourced it for over 30 years before we had the amazing good fortune to own it. And the second we owned it, I heard Andre's voice on my shoulder, and he used to talk about St. Helena as being a sunbasket. And it is. That's where the fog burns off there first, it burns off to the north and the south. It's warmer there during the days in the summer and fall, and colder at night, so it's very singular. And so we named it Sunbasket Vineyard because of that inspiration. It was only later that I found out that he had planted that vineyard back probably in the 30s or 40s for a Russian friend who owned the property, and the grapes went to BV. So it still gives me the chills.
I'll say, tell us a little bit more about the wine. Actually, let's go back to that. Tell us about the wine. How old are the vines now? What's up?
These vines were replanted in the 90s due to phylloxera, so they're now mature. In my mind, they're mature. Many people think they'd be pulled out, but they're just getting mature. They're 30-ish years old. And the wine is 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. It's growing on classic benchland, which is our jargon for the alluvium in that little neck of the woods. Historically called the Rutherford Bench. We can't use that term anymore because it went all the way from about Oakville up to St. Helena on those alluvial fans. But all the wines, Cabernets I make, are centered there on benchland between Rutherford and St. Helena. And what that gives me is some beautiful bright red and blue fruit and tannins that feel like velvet. These wines are very tannic, but the tannins that are there are very lush and velvety. Also really snappy natural acidity, which I very much like.
Fabulous. Here's the label. So you can see it actually has the St. Helena AVA, 100% Cabernet Sauvignon, 20 months French oak, 50% new. Now I took that from the tech sheet, so hopefully I got that right. And so I just tasted it with the manchego cheese. I also threw a little bit of the truffle salt on my popcorn. The other thing I'm going to suggest that I think people should try is the savory biscotti, particularly the herbed one with it. Got a couple of nods of appreciation there. Yep, that's the trick. And by the way, I haven't tasted the biscotti yet. You may want to add a little salt to that mix as well, because if there's a little bit of sweetness, which there has to be, is it good? Good without? Ooh, that's a really good. So it just shows to go you. I meant to say it that way. It goes to show you that that's what they do in the South. You don't have to have necessarily the typical cliche dish with the wine to make something out of it and to make a special pairing. How are we doing here? In-person audience, everybody that's with us today. All right, good. Because we always do a pairing plate, and I just think that's so important to make the most of the wines. We also really try to take our time with them. Kathy talked about that the vines planted in the 90s, she considers them mature as opposed to past their prime and ready to go. The regenerative farming piece of it, is that also something that can allow us to leave vines in the ground for longer so they have not only more time to do their thing, but it's more economical. Maybe they get deeper, they show more terroir expression. I mean, how do you think about that?
Absolutely. This Chardonnay here, these were 25-year-old vines in 2011 when we took the vineyard over.
Cool.
And they were run into the ground with conventional farming and weren't producing anymore. And that's why we were able to get the vineyard, and that kept the vines in, improved the soil, and the vines by the second year had tripled the crop.
Wow.
And now they're booming, and they still produce triple of what they were in their last year 25. and we don't fertilize it. It's all soil building. And so regenerative soil management works, and it extends the vine life.
And yes, I mean, I know I'm getting better the older I get. So surely the vine, okay, come on, stick with me here.
We want wise vines.
Exactly. But there's so much positive to that because it's true. I think it's really true that vines get more expressive and they're going to become a better dinner partner, just the way people do, because they have more, they fit more in their space and more in their skin. Do you think old vines, what can that look like in the Napa Valley? Because I hear Europeans say, I'm planting a vineyard for my children, meaning I don't expect to see this vineyard at its peak in my lifetime. Can we get there here?
We can definitely get old vines with good vine care, absolutely. We can make young vines can make beautiful wines too, and it can be really vibrant and full of fruit. And so I love all the vine ages, and that's the beauty of it is that the vineyard's changing over time, just like the wine.
And you know, it's interesting because I believe it's true that the 1973 Stag's Leaf Cabernet that won the Paris tasting was like third or fourth leaf fruit.
Yeah,
Speaking
exactly.
of great wines from young vines.
Yes.
So they're adorable, like, you know, charming little toddlers, and then great older women of a certain age or something or other. I don't know whatever that is. Okay, so let's move on to our fourth wine. We've been talking about the role of Robert Mondavi, and I'd just like everybody to enjoy this wine for a moment and think about this Mount Crushmore that we've been discussing. The themes have been mentorship of other people and sharing of information. And there's another element to it, though, that Robert Mondavi brought that I think changed the world as much as anything, and I mean in the sense of building a wine culture. And I will just say that I remember at Windows on the World when it was a big deal to have wine by the glass. And I mean beyond house white, house red, and house pink. And now we just expect it, right? That wasn't always the way. So if you think about it, you had mentioned that they took a jug wine industry and believed in its potential. And I think a lot of us have heard that quote of Robert Mondavi, we can make wines that rival the best in the world. But there also had to be a wine culture built because we didn't have it.
Right. And so he did that on both ends of it, because one of the things he revolutionized was tasting the wine with the growers that he was buying the fruit from.
Thank you guys.
And so that was a huge innovation. People just sold their fruit and they didn't know what happened to it. And so he tried to build a wine culture among the grape growers, and he was always on the road talking to anyone that would listen and building wine culture out on the road too. So it was like a whole thing, and it was tireless.
I hope that if you get a chance, and there will be other screenings, and eventually the whole episodic series of the documentary will be on streaming, and so make sure you check out my social so you'll know when that happens. I've got 7 episodes, 3 are done, 4 more in the works, and I will definitely get them done by August. Woohoo! But we are doing a screening of the short film on Saturday here at Copia at 4 o'clock. The themes of that come through so loud and clear, and I want you to see this video. We're going to play the Vincent Morrow video talking about the culture that Robert Mondavi worked to build.
So Bob and Margaret Mondavi, I don't think we are here today and having this conversation without either one of them. It really is the power of two. Breaking down that barrier of gatekeeping in a sense. Please come into our home, the Napa Valley. Come to where we produce the wine. Let's find out what you like. Let's talk about what you taste. Let's open this bottle so you can have a glass. You don't have to have the whole bottle. You can have a glass of it. That translated into how they approached restaurants and promoting that to sommeliers.
And then they went even further, blending wine terroir with the terroir of human creativity, art, architecture, food, music, even sports. because they call out to us through sight, through sound, scent and flavor, and through spectacle, sometimes all at once. So, one glass and one taste at a time, we've just traveled through 50 years of wine history, meeting the visionaries of then, now, and next, who've given us a flavor guide to classic grapes and hallowed ground all over the globe. That's terroir in motion, taste shaped by place. And it changed not just the wine world, but how we farm, cook, eat, and travel. From the kitchens of California to the vineyards of Argentina, from Tuscany to Texas, wine became a passport and wine country became a destination all its own.
So I did the whole Mount Crushmore thing, but then I was like, I wonder if you did an airport destination board and you put every airport code that has a wine region, and that's what that was. So if you see SFO, then or SMF, that's my favorite airport to go to wine country. It's a little bit of a best kept secret. So if you're coming to the Napa Valley, when you're coming to the Napa Valley, you can check that one out if SFO doesn't work for you, because it's a lot more chill. But I think that it's such an important thing, and I also, in that graphic, everything that lights up in red is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, because wine regions are really preserving something important. They're preserving agriculture, responsible agriculture, and a culture. And what Robert Mondavi did, and then it made so much sense, and the rest of the community jumped in, was rolled out the welcome mat. How important was that?
So important. There's the ability to come to here and experience the sunshine, the Sunbasket, the smell of the air, and taste the wines. It changes people's lives in terms of how they approach food and wine. That one visit, and everyone that comes into our winery every day, you just see they're so happy to be there. It means a lot to them. They've been waiting for it, and when they have that bottle of wine when they're back home, they feel like they're here, because wine is a teleportation device. It takes you back to the place and the time, the vintage. That's one of the really cool things about wine. As Kathy said, it's the one of the few things that can speak of time and place and then go forward in time, still speaking of time and place. And that's it's like a person in a way, right? Because we all are speaking of our origins, but also of our experience through time. And it's just such a special thing. Robert Mondavi, this is the Reserve To Kalon Vineyard. We all know and love the To Kalon Vineyard because it's like a homecoming for those of us when we drive up Valley. We just see that and go, yes, it's still here. 94% Cabernet Sauvignon, 3% Franc and Petit Verdot, 20 months in French oak, 100% new. I did get a chance to talk to the winemaker emeritus, Geneviève Janssens, because she was mentored directly by Mr. Mondavi, and she always said that he really wanted wines to be friendly with food. And so I really encourage everyone I tried it with the herbed biscotti. It's also fantastic with the manchego cheese. I haven't tried it with the meatball yet. I'm sure that's absolutely perfect. And everyone's loving that. I just can't figure out how to do it without making a royal mess. And since I'm here hosting, I will save that for later. But I was pretty confident in that. But you were talking about the experience, and I was so glad that Vincent Morrow talked about it being the power of two, because when I moved here, Margaret Mondavi so impressed upon me, and they were already so long into this from the 70s, wine, food, and the arts. And she was very much into the arts, but in all forms. I still have a little baby gift card that she hand watercolored to give to our youngest, and when he was born. And it just was really an important thing, and I really want to make sure that you take away something that's important to me, which is that as part of this documentary series, I realized that all those things have a terroir, right? Food, of course, has a terroir, whether it's low country shrimp and grits, or state line road barbecue, which thankfully we have some here in the Napa Valley. And but also we're expanding the definition to other things, because music has a terroir, at least certain genres of it. How do you feel about that? Absolutely. That's one of the beautiful things is place when it comes to all of it. That's why we travel, is to experience that. And one of the great things about wine is that it carries that too. It's unique among agricultural products that it lasts and it travels well. And that's been going on for a long time, right? Egyptians 5,000 years ago had different wine regions that they have hieroglyphics that this wine was better with this food and that wine better with that food. And so this is not new.
Yeah, and wow, I didn't know about that, but it totally makes sense because they were mighty smart and thoughtful about things. So we've got our final wine here, the Stag's Leap SLV, and I just want you to talk a little. Amen. Okay, we're having a religious experience here, which of course we are, and a philosophical one for sure. So I want you to talk about Warren Winiarski and what he taught you about wine.
So, like Mondavi, it was you can always do better, and so it's the 2 weeks before he passed away. I think he was 95. He was asking for videos of the vineyard to make sure that people were doing it like we talked about. So, never satisfied, and that it made it. He was a challenging guy to work for in that way, but it was an exciting guy to work for because if you are also trying to master your craft, here's someone that would support that and push with you, right? And so we worked together for 18 years, and he hired me as his consultant. And if you think about that, I was in my 30s, and he was a legend with a wine in the Smithsonian. And why is he hiring me as a consultant? It was curiosity, and because he wanted to learn what's new and how's this young kid think about things. And so we had this, it was such a fun relationship because we'd have these like long arguments. We had a running argument for a couple of years about whether vines grow towards the sun or grow in the presence of light.
Ooh.
Because it has a lot to say about agency and intentionality in the plant, and it was really, so how do we conduct viticulture, right? And so it was just a super fun relationship with it, to be trying out in the vineyard with this legend and geeking out and trying to figure out how to make good wine and how to grow good grapes.
I want to know which side of the argument you were on, towards the sun or, whatever the other one was. Something
going
about
in the presence of light.
Presence of light. Your presence of light.
I was the presence
yes,
of light.
I knew it. I read your canopy management, long essays on canopy management. They're so cool, though. It's like if a fashion designer could do a canopy the way you do, the Met Gala would oh my God. Gaga or Beyonce or somebody would be wearing that thing and just going. Man, yeah, wow, that's really cool. Yeah, it's funny that you say a challenging relationship because I remember I spoke, after my first book, I came out and spoke to the Napa Valley vintners and I said something about Cabernet, something that Warren really liked, Napa Valley Cabernet. And like about a month later, he called me and he said, "Can I have a copy of your speech?" And I was like, I don't think I wrote it down or kept it. He's like, what? He was really like not happy with me. But yeah, because he was just.
And he probably took that opportunity to give you a lesson about writing things down.
Write it down, exactly.
Yeah.
And now I scan everything. I try to do all of, yes. I reminded him of that when I saw him at my Gergich's 100th birthday. And he was like laughing. But anyway, so this is a beautiful wine. Let's show the graphic on the Stag's Leap so everybody can see the vinification. It's 95% Cabernet Sauvignon, 5% Cabernet Franc, 20 months in 100% new French oak. And so again, you guys, if I could hold 5 glasses, I did on the cover of a book, but they were tiny glasses. It's good to be us.
I'm not going to try that.
Yeah, this is like quite something. We are in the presence of royalty here, and it's super, super special. What do we think about that wine? I tasted it with the herb biscotto. I love that. Everything with popcorn, but that's part of my justification is, it's whole grain. It's fairly low fat. Yeah, it's health food. Mm-hmm. And I got antioxidants. Basically, I got a doctor's note for what we have here. So the Mount Crushmore of American wine. It's not a list. It's a foundation of a tree. So my front row, you are on it. All across the country and the world, when I've been to different places to film for this documentary, I've asked people about who's on your Mount Crushmore. A lot of times, Robert Mondavi and André come up in many other wine regions too, which is cool. Warren Winiarski for sure. And the thing that everybody shares in common is vision, belief, and the willingness, the open-heartedness to share, to want to grow together. You talked about Warren basically staying curious, never thinking he knew it all. And when you started working with him, it was shortly after he had sold the winery. So he was basically all vineyard focused at that point, right?
2 years before he sold it. When I started working for him, he was still deciding. He was a private guy, so I didn't know until later that he was still deciding. And part of why he hired me, it turns out, was he wanted me to memorialize a lot of the ways things were done, and so that it could carry forward when he was no longer participating in it.
Nice.
And so he planned that out like a couple years in advance.
Very thoughtful, but he continued to do obviously a ton of vineyard work because he had his own vineyards.
He kept the Arcadia vineyard.
Yeah. And
89-acre vineyard.
Wow, oh my goodness, which is super special.
Yeah, the 11th hour, he realized he couldn't give up the vineyards, and he pulled that out of the deal.
You know, that's beautiful. We've got a couple of minutes left, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to take it back to Steven Spurrier, because he is a legend, was a legend in his own time, which he deserved to be, because he too was that generous spirit. Actually, you have a cool Steven Spurrier story about tasting with him not long before he passed away.
Yeah, we got to taste the 73 Clos de Vol. Jason Wise was filming and said, hey, do you want to come taste this? Because it was in the premier Napa Valley. Went downstairs in the old CIA, and there's Steven Spurrier. And it was so fun because just all these great people, one of the things they have in common is curiosity and open-mindedness. And he approached that wine, he was dying to taste it and see how it still was, and he talked about the tannins, and it still has fruit, and like a little kid. And it was so fun to see that joy he had for trying that wine.
That's super special. I have one more video to show you that shows Steven, because a lot of people don't know. I hear very often that the 1976 Judgment of Paris tasting was a competition into which people entered their wines, and it was not. So let's play that video.
We've held lots of tastings, but we've never held a tasting of California wine. And the purpose is to draw attention to the quality of wine coming out of California. But I said, we need a peg to hang it on. And she said, I've got the exact peg that next year, 1976, is the bicentennial of the War of American Independence. And I said, well, Patricia, we British don't celebrate that because we lost the colonies, but I'll go along with it. It was too much of a risk to me to have these wines damned with faint praise. And so I told Patricia, I said, I'm going to choose the 4 best white Burgundies from the shop and the 4 best red Bordeaux and put them in blind. And she said, you can't do that because the judges are coming just to taste California wine. I said, I'll explain it to them on the day, and if they don't agree, we won't do it. So, of course, all the judges turn up, and I said, most of you are not accustomed to these wines, and therefore I thought it would be more interesting to compare them blind to the top wines of Vineyard Bordeaux. Do you have any problem with that? Bien sûr, Mr. Spurrier, pas de problème. And the rest is history.
So that video, the series of videos, was shot in collaboration with Cultured Vine, Danelle and Angela Dewar. I forgot, Danelle, where you're at. There she is. They take care of a lot of wonderful visitors to the Napa Valley with their business, and befriended Steven, and we were doing this event to do California and the world, and then it got delayed by COVID, and so we sent a videographer and did our interviews with Steven, planning to do the event with him in 2021. That didn't work out because of his health diagnosis, but he wanted us to keep it going so we could tell the story of Patricia and also could continue the evolution of the legend, which is that it leveled the playing field for wine regions across the globe. And Steven's vision, as you see now from that video, was that it's one thing to do as well as the wines were a hair's breadth point. There was no loser that day, right? All the wines were beautifully high, like great scores. beautifully showed well. But he knew that California needed to be judged against the French benchmarks, not just judged on its own by French palates. So when you had that formula, that in his mind was the important thing, and I don't think the tasting would have been the impact without that.
Not even close. It would have said, these are all good wines, or they're okay wines. His point about damning with faint praise, it's just, that was the bombshell, right? It was genius.
And it's really special because it takes us all the way back to America 250, and I'm a sap for authenticity, and I know, we all know, that the French were with us in the American Revolution. If you didn't learn that in history, and trust me, I didn't learn everything I could have or should have, but that's a really important friendship, and the know-how, the French training that André brought, because he was trained at the Pasteur Institute in France, and I don't think anybody knew anything about the importance of malolactic fermentation the way he did. And now it's, the stuff we take for granted, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a super exciting thing to just connect those dots and circle it back to the spirit of believing, mentorship, wine, food, and the arts, food especially, no, but all of that. And all of us together here to be able to do this is really exciting. So thank you very much, Steve. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you to our fabulous in-studio live audience. Everybody want to give it one final wave if we can flip over to that camera. Awesome. You can see you got to see the wine and food experience that they have. Next episode is Behind the Blind. So if you want to tune in live or join us live, we will be exploring all the tips, tricks, training techniques, and whatnot of blind tasting by how master sommeliers do it, how masters of wine do it, how Wine and Spirits Education Trust diploma, because there's lots of tips and tricks. And blind tasting, the idea of it is that you can hone in on identity, why, to know if it's true to type and true to place, because we talked about terroir and transparency, but also quality. And so we will see you June, 17th, I think it is. I already forgot. But we'll show you that at the end here. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you, everyone. Steve, thank you. We'll see you next time.